Hey Bright Lights, welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. My name is Angela. I am an architect, researcher, and feng shui practitioner who has studied the science behind design for well-being so you don't have to. Whether you are also a design professional like me, or you are just somebody who wants to have better quality space that promotes health in your home, your workplace, or your community, this is your one-stop shop for thoughtful weekly videos. So if this is what you are looking for, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. We are going to use my Salutogenesis deck to understand both foundational concepts about what creates or can upset well-being in our body, mind, and spirit, as well as the theory of salutogenesis and 5 aspects or supporting theories that I've also linked with the elements of feng shui to make it a little bit easier for you to understand and to make some deeper connections. So the way this works is each week I draw a card from each of those sections of the deck. And I talk about the science behind it, the theories, as well as make recommendations for improvements you can make to space, design thoughts, and feng shui tips. So you're going to hear something different every single time because what I talk about depends on the companion cards that I'm drawing. So the first card that I drew for this week is socioeconomic. Now, this is a two-part card. It deals with something called the exposome. And the exposome is really everything that we encounter in our lives. And the first part of the exposome is, of course, the external environment. Those are things like air quality, amount of noise in the environment, water quality, access to green space, things like that. Socioeconomic, you may have also heard as social determinants of health. These are things like how stable is your employment? Do you have quality, safe housing? Do you live in a safe community? How much education do you have? How strong is your social network? All of these things that are social and economic have a huge impact on well-being, to the extent that if I know your zip code, I can actually predict your lifespan, believe it or not, because we can understand things about the demographics of people living in that zip code that give us these socioeconomic clues. Very important. And as you can see on the card, there's a picture of an individual woman, but her image is kind of filled in by a collective, a community, because the community in which this individual is immersed in is going to provide her more or less resources to cope. And that's what salutogenesis is really all about. Now, the companion card that I drew is polyvagal theory, and it comes from the relaxation response part of the deck. Relaxation response is associated with the water element in feng shui, and water symbolizes healing. Relaxation response, I also like to say it is I restore, is exactly that. It is the resetting of our nervous system so that we can be in a state of calm, relaxation, regeneration. And it is the antidote to the stress response. So we've heard of fight or flight, that's the stress response. On the other side of that is rest and digest, or the parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm going to get really specific here. We have a nervous system that is called our autonomic nervous system, and it's called that because it is automatically set. And it is set as we react through the day, we go through life, we encounter people, places, things, and we have a reaction to them. So we have a sympathetic nervous system that gets activated when we feel we need to be alert, when we are really invigorated by something, or when we sense danger. And we have a parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calm, relaxed, engaged part of our nervous system where we're growing, we're regenerating cells, we're healing. So, this is the part associated with wellness. And normally we would flip back and forth throughout the day, but we might spend a majority of time, ideally, in that parasympathetic state. But for people who are experiencing a lot of stress or a trauma, that is more and more difficult to do. And as you can imagine, when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, it's taking resources away. And when our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, it is putting resources back. So it's almost like a bank account, whether we are saving up or we are withdrawing. And if we withdraw too much without putting anything in, we're going to hit that 0 point. We don't want to do that when we're talking about our well-being. Now, specifically polyvagal theory. This was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. He was a neuroscientist and a psychologist who created this in 1984. And it deals with specifically how the body regulates itself based on our response to the world around us. So, do we feel safe? Do we not feel safe? And specifically, how the vagus nerve, which is Latin for wandering, it is the longest nerve in our body. It touches all of our major organ systems. So, it is really the delivery system for whether that sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system gets activated. So it's really important that we are much more conscious of what is either creating the stress response or not. And when we can be more conscious, we can do things to kind of intervene with these automatic responses and kind of do the manual reset, if you will, on our nervous system to get that parasympathetic state more activated, which has obvious benefits for our health and our well-being. So how does that work? Well, there are really three states that we need to think about when we talk about polyvagal theory. There is fight or flight. That's the sympathetic nervous system. It's activated. Mobilization, right? We need to do something to stay safe. There is the collapse state. You might have heard that as freeze. In polyvagal theory, it's called immobilization. And that's when we feel overwhelmed. So our brain kind of shuts down. We can dissociate. This can happen when we feel that we cannot escape or control something bad that's happening to us if we have a trauma. And then going forward, anything that reminds us of that trauma causes that same overwhelm and shutdown. But it can also happen in smaller ways when we just feel overloaded and like we do not have control. We go into burnout, we go into that freeze state, we dissociate from our body. But the last part of polyvagal theory that is what I really want to pick out today is the social engagement. So there's something called co-regulation, and we've all seen it, right? We've seen a crowd where everyone responds and begins to mimic one another. So if there's a panic, the crowd stampedes. If everyone is enjoying themselves, it tends to make new people joining the crowd also enjoy themselves. This can also happen one-on-one as we mirror the reactions that we see in others. And this is a skill that is hardwired into us from early childhood. This is how we learn about the world. We learn from what our parents or other adults in our lives are doing. It's why, sometimes if a baby is playing and falls down, if the adult panics and rushes over, the baby will start crying. If the adult laughs and says, oopsie, get up, the baby laughs too, because the baby is mirroring the response of the others around it and will either decide that something is a bad experience or good experience based on the cues that it is picking up from others. And we kind of have that symbolized on the card here, where you can see we're in an Arctic situation. We have a seal hunting a fish and a bear in the background. And is the bear going to hunt the seal? Maybe not today. But it is that sense of awareness. So the seal is concentrating on the fish, on the positive, not on the danger that could potentially be there with the polar bear. And again, the blue sky shows clarity when we are managing our polyvagal system. We're not having that trauma response to that bear. Instead, we're having the positive response to the fact that we're going to have the meal by hunting the fish. That is really what we want to be promoting in an environment. So what do we do for design for that socioeconomic exposome? Well, we could think about this in a really big scale in a community where we want to make sure that we have gathering spaces for people, but we also want to have safe places to sit, defensible space, so that we have our back to something solid. That's also a really important concept in feng shui. Our back is to something solid, therefore we can see what's coming, we feel safe, we can defend our space. We have space that allows us to see what others are doing. So we understand what is the norm for behavior. Is this an activity we want to be a part of or not? And if we see positive people positively interacting with one another, that's going to trigger that social connection part of polyvagal theory, which is going to regulate our nervous system, calm it down, keep us in that parasympathetic state that's so important. It's also going to strengthen our social network, which is a big part of our health and well-being. There's a thing known as the loneliness epidemic, which is happening because we are together alone in the modern world. So we are super connected, more so than ever, via electronic devices and social media. Yet we are not having that face-to-face quality interaction, human to human. We are not feeling supported in a network, and that is actually affecting our health. So even if you are taking excellent care of yourself, eating well, getting exercise, living in a great neighborhood, you are at health risk if you don't have strong social connections. So I really want to emphasize this. If you are working within a specific space, I want you to think about not only that defensible space, that back to the wall, but what we call in feng shui environmental anchors. So when I see something, based on my cultural background as well as my personal associations, I'm going to have a positive or negative response. What does that mean? Well, you could see, for example, behind me on the shelf, there is a lightning bolt. A lightning bolt is really, to me, a symbol of my dad who passed away about 16 years ago, but who used to tell me reassuring things like, everything happens for a reason. You're going to be okay. He believed in me, so I believed in me. And now that he's passed, I often see lightning bolts show up in the most unlikely places. Like literally, one time I was walking on a beach and a piece of driftwood in the shape of a lightning bolt washed up on the shore. And I see those as signs from my dad that not only am I going to be all right, but that my role here on this earth is to be a change maker, is to help people, is to disrupt thinking that we don't have control over our environment and help people see that they do. So, because the lightning bolt means that to me, I choose to place images like the lightning bolt that you see there, where I can see them because it helps me every time I see it, even if I'm not consciously thinking about it, to remember that about myself, to know that I have a spiritual helper in my dad who's looking out for me. And that helps me to feel reassured. So there are other things I'm sure you can think of in your own life or in the lives of someone you're close to that have certain positive associations. And having that imagery, whether it is a piece of art, an actual object, a message that you frame or place somewhere where you can see it, a vision board, anything like that is an environmental anchor. And if you are designing for a group of other people, collectively, culturally, what are going to be their positive environmental anchors? Make sure you do the work to find that out and put those symbols, patterns, colors, objects into the space. When we do this, we are reinforcing that social engagement part of well being that is hardwired into us through our nervous system, and we co-regulate one another to a state of calm, joy, and wellness. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something that you can put into use right away. And if you did, make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode of this. Thanks so much again for being here, and I will see you next time.